What is a soul to you? That's a hard question. I would say, like theologically, a soul is aspect of the human, that aspect of human being that's akin to divinity, that's made in the image of God. And so, and I think that that's a very, very important concept. I don't think a society can survive. I don't think that you can survive a relationship with yourself. I don't think you can have a relationship with another person. And I don't think a society can organize itself in a productive and sustainable and peaceful manner without that idea as the core idea. And so the core idea is that there's something of irreducible value that characterizes each human being, and that it's of the highest value, which is what makes it, say, akin to God or akin to divinity. And so that's the soul. And then the question is, maybe, how does that manifest itself in the world? So what are its hallmarks? And I would say that that's very tightly associated with what modern people describe as consciousness. And there's more to it than consciousness, because it's also character. But I would say character is a manifestation of consciousness. What consciousness does, as far as I can tell, is confront unformed potential. And this is partly why I think it's improper. I'm writing a fair bit about this right now in my new book, why it's improper to think of people as deterministic. You're deterministic once you've established a habit and you've practiced something for a very long period of time. You become more deterministic in your actions because you're expert at reacting. And there's neurophysiological circuits that are laid down to facilitate your action under those conditions and to run with some degree of automaticity. But much of the time, what you confront is the changing future, the future of potential, right? And it's like a place of multiple pathways, and your consciousness is that part of you that confronts those multiple pathways and decides which one to walk down. And it does so according to its ethic. We talked earlier about the fact that you need a value hierarchy. It's inevitable that you have a value hierarchy and that you look at the world through it, and that it should be well structured, and that there should be something of divine importance at the top. I would say what should occupy the top position is the realization, for example, that each person is of divine value, and that the most appropriate way of interacting with potential is by embodying and speaking the truth. That's not a bad way of briefly conceptualizing what might be at the highest pinnacle of the value structure. I would say that's what the logos is. And so the soul is what manifests itself in the choice between different pathways, in the choice between different ways of transforming the potential of the future into the actuality of the present. And it does that by making ethical decisions, by choosing between good and evil at each choice point. And to the degree that it chooses good, then it takes the raw potential of the future and it transforms it into the being of the present that is good. And to the degree that it does that in a manner that's evil and contaminated by malevolence and hatred and vengefulness, then it takes a pathway that corrupts the world and makes things worse. And it's the soul that's doing that, and it's the soul that's responsible for that. And it's also that active part of the soul that's shaping the deeper soul in some sense, which would be something like the cumulative consequence of all those choices, something akin to what people more classically have referred to as character. Now, I don't know what to say really about the metaphysics of the soul, except that it's very mysterious that we have this capacity for consciousness, which is completely, I would say, beyond our current understanding. We have no good reductionist accounts of consciousness except those put forward to deny the very existence of something like consciousness and free will. And the problem I have with those arguments is that, well, the first thing is that you don't look deterministic until you've built habit sets. And that's a consequence of consciousness, because consciousness builds habit sets. And the second is that it doesn't seem to me possible to organize a relationship with yourself or an intimate partner or a family or a community without the concept of the divine value of the individual and the capacity of that divine spark, let's say, to manifest itself in free will. I don't see how societies can organize themselves without those principles. And to me, that indicates that there's something about them that's profoundly true. Now, we all have our definitions of what constitutes sufficient proof for truth, but I think that's powerful. Those are two powerful arguments. So it's hard to say what the soul means metaphysically because, say beyond the confines of a single human being, we do have this sense that the soul can expand itself into something that's greater than it has been. It has this capacity for growth. And we do have this sense that the soul can expand itself to the point where it's enlightened, for lack of a better word, that it's working as efficiently as possible to transform everything that's unnecessarily painful and malevolent about the world into what's positive and good. And that it does that as a consequence of confronting the world with courage and truth. And I think that's right. And I do think that means that the soul participates in something eternal, which is the attempt of being itself to transform what's unnecessarily painful and malevolent into what's good. And that human beings actually do participate in that. And that's part of the reason that our ancient tradition insists that we're made in the image of God. And I think that it's a mistake to underestimate the importance of that, because I don't think that you can live a life of sufficient profundity to protect yourself from being corrupted by suffering and malevolence without adopting a responsibility that's commensurate with that set of ideas. I think that you either orient yourself upward, to the star above the horizon and try desperately to improve the structure of being, or you work at counter purposes to it and make things worse. I don't think there's a middle ground. In fact, to the degree there is a middle ground, it tilts towards the negative, because people who try to occupy the middle ground generally try to accrue the benefit, let's say, without adopting any of the risk. And that's not acceptable, not helpful. So that's a soul to me. And I guess I would say one more thing about that. A soul is also the center of the world, which is a frightening proposition and not one that's easily comprehensible. Solzhenitsyn's work in the Gulag Archipelago is particularly enlightening in this regard, because he insisted that it was a preconception of our Judeo-Christian heritage that each person was a center of the cosmos. And you can think of that as a center of consciousness, right? A center from which being itself is not only reflected, but also generated. And it was Solzhenitsyn's belief, and Dostoevsky's as well, and I think Jung would have been in accordance with this, and Nietzsche as well, for that matter, that in some manner that we don't fathom, because we don't understand the structure of the world very well, the outcome of the world is dependent on our choices, and equally on all of our choices. And I don't understand. I know that to be true, or feel that to be true. It's part of the doctrine that each person is of intrinsic and equal worth. Part of that doctrine is that each person has intrinsic and equal responsibility, and that we're each capable of generating a fair bit of hell around us and for other people, but also capable of generating a tremendous amount of good, and that the fate of the world as it careens through eternity is actually a consequence of the ethical decisions of each of us. It's a terrifying idea. It's no wonder people flee from it into hedonism, let's say, and ideology, because it's very frightening possibility that the choices that you make day to day or fail to make have this profound and lasting effect on the structure of reality. But I don't really see any way out of that conclusion.